Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Now, this is a tool that helps web app testers work together with developers and triagers and security operations, people who have to fix the vulnerabilities that these pen testers find. Now, just so I understand who's here, does anyone here work as a web app pen tester? That's a pretty good show. Does anyone work as a developer or security operations? Have we got, in the audience, a bug bounty triager? Wow, 2! Fantastic. Come and talk to me at the end. Right, now, anyone who has worked in these roles probably has at some time or other had the difficulty of trying to communicate a complex vulnerability with a developer. So you've done your pen test, you've found this difficult corner of the app, you're 3 steps into a multi-stage login form. It will only accept your post request if the token's already been through those first 2 stages, and there's JavaScript validation you've got to bypass. And trying to explain all this to a developer who does not know security is really difficult. And what I've found almost universally with developers is they want to reproduce the problem on their computer. You can give them logs, you can give them screenshots, you can give them all the proof you want, but until it reproduces on their computer, at some level they just don't believe it's a real thing. And sometimes it gets really hard to do this. And a few common approaches people have used to deal with this have got major shortcomings. So I've worked at places where they say that every finding has got to have a complete HTTP request and response. And the idea is that it doesn't matter how difficult the thing is, they just copy that HTTP request, put it into a tool like Burp Repeater and send it off. But this is fatally flawed because in that request you've got all sorts of session tokens, CSRF tokens, and while they're all still valid while the pen tester's working on it, 3 days later, by the time someone's reading this report, the tokens have expired, so it doesn't reproduce. Now, because of the difficulty of this led me to think, what if reproducing vulnerabilities was as easy as saying tea, Earl Grey, hot? And that led me to design this extension called Replicator. Now, the key feature is that all the pen tester's findings are embedded in a single file. So this can be sent from the pen tester to the developer using whatever secure report delivery mechanism you have in place. And once the developer has this, they have got one-click replication. So I'm going to go through in this talk what the developer will see. I'm going to go through the pen tester side of this, and if we've still got time at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about coding Burp extensions and some of the subtleties in coding this. Can I just check? Can everyone read the text? The bug triage is right at the back. Fantastic. Now, so once you've installed Replicator from the BAP store, and by the way, if there are any Burp users here who have not yet found this BAP tab within Burp, you are really missing out. It's the best tab in the whole program. Once you install it, you get a tab here. Oh, I'm just going to put this to start with in a developer view. Now, so we've had this pen test commissioned. This lead pen test has found loads of interesting stuff. They've sent us the report, and they've sent us the replicator file, which we are now going to load. Now, we've just got a little security warning here. Because this file we're opening can update our burp config, maybe it could update something we didn't want it to update. However, in this case, I know this file has come from a trusted source, so I'm quite happy to say yes. So we've got 3 vulnerabilities here: cross-site scripting, SQL injection, and unauthorized access to the admin panel. Now, each one of these has got a probe request that's associated with the vulnerability. And what we can do, if we hit the test button here, this is going to send this probe to the target application and figure out if we're still vulnerable or not. And in this case, as we'd expect, as we've not yet done any remediation, we're still vulnerable. In fact, we can save a few clicks here and we can just hit test all. And we can see they're all still vulnerable. Now, one of the first subtleties that you hit when you start doing remediation is normally developers don't have access to the exact same system that the pen test was done on. So in this particular example, the pen test had been performed on mydemo-staging.com, which is a little bit away from where we're working. However, we have access to mydemodev.com. Now, I can go in here and I can update this. And yes, we do want to change the target for all the macros and session handling rules. Now, you might have noticed that this status then disappeared. So we'll just run test all again just to check that my demo dev is in the same state as my demo staging. And we've got something unable to replicate. We'll deal with that in a minute. So, cross-site scripting. Let's have a look at this. Now, I've got the code just here. Now, the path was /name. So if I look through the code, this is a Python and Flask app. So we're looking through these things. See, this says app.root, which connects HTTP URLs to controller methods. And if we look down, there is the root for name. Now, if we look at the code, and I know most pen testers are pretty good at doing a quick code audit. We can see that name has been fetched from the request, and then it is used in the HTML without any escaping. So this is the simplest possible kind of XSS. Come in.
I'm not here. This isn't happening.
Oh, okay.
Just need this.
Right. Now, if we...
You're using it. Damn.
I've got another one. There's one in my bag somewhere. It's just root through it. It's black. Do you want anything else? Right. Now, I've just for expediency, I've left in a line which is going to sanitize our input. So we come out of that and then we restart our app. We can test this again. Well, this looks promising. It said it's resolved, but there is a little weasel word there next to resolved. It says resolved tentatively. Now, what Replicator has shown here is that the exact same attack that the pen tester used no longer works. But there's always the risk that someone's going to come along and use a different attack. This approach doesn't prove that you fixed the root cause of the vulnerability. I imagine the testers here have had a number of experiences of creative ways that your clients have fixed vulnerabilities. For instance, perhaps doing a check for the exact payload you included in the report and just rejecting that and nothing else. To confirm that you fixed the root cause of the vulnerability, you really need a person to look at it. So that's why we say resolve tentative. And in a commercial environment, what you do is you'd say, that is the end of the dev team's bit. They've proven that attack vector no longer works. It's time to pass it back to the professional pen test team to fully confirm resolution. Now, if we do an active scan, let me just check I've not got any old data. I'll just clear some of this old stuff off. Now, if we do an active scan of this vulnerability that we've resolved, what's going on? We definitely escaped the less than sign. How come we've still got cross-site scripting? So if we take a closer look at this, within the response, Burp always highlights the interesting bits of the request and the response. And you can see that the page context was within the value attribute of an input tag. So that Burp's been able to use an alternative attack that doesn't use the less than sign. That's actually one of my favourite was that to use the on-focus event and also provide the autofocus tag, because that causes the XSS to execute without any user interaction. So in this case, it wasn't sufficient to just check for less than signs. So I'm saying all this just to ram home the point that this will confirm that the exact attack vector used is no longer vulnerable. You need some manual testing to prove it's definitely fixed. Now, we were left with this one that was unable to replicate. Now, I've made this second example is a little bit harder. I'm just thinking if I fix this now in front of you, I'm going to spoil the surprise of how we introduce it in the pen test side. So we're going to just put that to one side for now. And I'm going to go back to the slides. Yeah, so what we've got in this file, we've got the list of vulnerabilities, we've got the probe requests. Now there is one other crucial thing we've got, and that's the detection logic. So we send the probe request to the server and we get a response back, and we need some mechanism to say, does that response show the application is vulnerable or not? Now, the most simple type of detection logic is the grep expression. Now, in the example of cross-site scripting, the grep expression is the exact payload that's been used. So if this is echoed back without escaping, we can infer that the page is vulnerable. And if it's changed in some way, we can infer that it's not. The tool also supports collaborator detections as well. Has anyone here found vulnerabilities with Burp Collaborator? Is that all? It's been ages on that. Yeah, out of bound detection is where it's all at. Okay, so if you have a vulnerability that's like blind in the response but causes an out of bound interaction, you can detect it with the collaborator detection mode. Okay. Right. Now, this was all the developer's side. What I want to do is change hat now and look at this from the pen tester's point of view. Now, I'm going to just restart the extension to clear the data off. Now, top tip, if you want to restart an extension, if you hold down Control when you click this, it does a quick restart without asking you to confirm, which is really handy when you're developing extensions. Okay, so we've got a blank replicator. Now, I'm going to put this into tester mode. We get a few more options there, and there's one crucial thing that we get elsewhere, which we'll see shortly. Now, the other thing I have to remember to do is that we fixed a vulnerability before, so I need to put this back in its original vulnerable state. Okay, so now we're going to do a quick pen test of this app. Now, please do not judge me on my graphic design abilities. This app is sufficient for demonstrating certain coding flaws. It ain't going to win no awards. The login form, it uses the golden ratio to achieve nice distribution across the screen. I mean, it uses top-of-the-range fonts. And like most pen tests, the client has given us some test credentials to log in. So we can log in here. And we can browse through the dynamic interactive front page. And we can put some data in some of these fields. Because what we want to do is start filling the site. Christ, I did have this going through Burp, didn't I? Oh, god damn. I've probably got to turn intercept off as well now. Hang on. It's definitely not possible for it to be doing that. Right. Come on, Rafal, you're always good at debugging these things. Right, so hang on, now let's think about this. Right, it's definitely right. The listener's definitely running. Hang on, what if I paste the URL in Replicator? That'll reduce by half the number of possible things that could be wrong. Paste URL as request. I've not got upstream. Definitely didn't do this before. Right. So if it's no proxy, it connects to it. So that means it's connected to the virtual machine correctly. Burp can't connect it. Oh, has it run out of sockets? Oh,
is there anyone technical in the room that knows anything about Burp that can help Paul?
Yeah, come on.
He did promise a dance if this went wrong, so...
I did!
You did. Family-friendly, he said.
What I didn't anticipate is that I'd be so agitated about fixing it to have time to dance. So if someone could dance as an interlude... I always do that. Right. Are you still listening? actually, sometimes these little mishaps, I drop them in deliberately because if it all works slick, people just think it's a pre-recorded video. So, you know. Right, well, where was I? I was deleting some of this data, so we were starting from... Right, have we got a listener? Right. Intercept is definitely off. Right. Okay, this has to work. It's impossible for this not to work. Are you not using Foxy Proxy? I've forgotten how to do that. So without Foxy Proxy, Chrome uses the host one. I think it's got a thing in the settings where oh, hey! Yes. That sounds like a good.
Would you like to give his presentation?
Okay, I think actually what I'm going to do, I'm just going to ditch doing the demo and I'll talk you through what it does. So, what we do, we walk through the site and we build up a bit of a sitemap. And then in the sitemap, we start using Active Scanner on the branches and we find some vulnerabilities. And very quickly, we find the cross-site scripting vulnerability. There was an SQL injection vulnerability in the that I showed you in the developer view. Now, on a first go, Scanner doesn't find it. If I just put a single quote into the search page, and I guess I can do that because you don't need a proxy for that. You need a what? You don't need a website for it. No. So if we just put a single quote in there, there is a very high indication that there is an SQL injection vulnerability there. On the first go, Burp Scanner does not pick this up. Now, the reason for this is that the page has a CSRF token. Now, it's a one-use CSRF token. So if Scanner's using it, it sends off one request. That token expires. And then when it does the next request with the next payload, the tokens expire so it doesn't do a scan. Now, you can work around this within Burp, if you had some data in your proxy history, using the session handling rules. That might be why it was locking up. Now, what we can do is we can define a macro that will fetch the token. So, when we look down our proxy history, we've got these GET requests for search. And the response includes a token. So we can define a macro that will no, I'm not sure. Definitely pressed it. Okay. So that's one half of it. And then the second half is to create a session handling rule. Now, in fact, what we want to do is we want to find a suitable post request. Now, we can copy the URL from that. And we can paste it in there. So what's going to happen now is each time Burp goes to this URL, this session handling rule is going to trigger. And what we're going to tell it to do is run a macro. And we're going to use that fetch CSRF token macro we just set up. Now, yes, but it still can't talk to the back-end app.
The URL in the requester, sorry, the repeater was high level. I don't know if you still got it. So does that resolve as well?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it just hangs. I'm going to leave it as a complete mystery why it just hangs. Now, so the point is, to get that to scan correctly, you need to set up the macro and the session handling rule. The key point, the key thing that Replicator does when you load the file is that the relevant rules are loaded. So the pen tester can set up all the session handling rules to get the scan to run correctly. And then when you generate the replicator file, these rules are taken out of your Burp config, put in this file, you send it to the developer, and when they load it into Burp, they get all the rules out of the box. So in the absence of connectivity problems, it just works. Now, I'm presuming that if I so it stops at some point because earlier on we clicked that and they responded. So it's something that stops at some point.
When you switch the code to another copy, copied over that keep version, does that one actually work?
The keep one, the keep one works. The not keep one gets edited throughout. Oh, well, you see, right. This guy seems to be responding again. Right, I'm going to roll with this for now. Right, those guys can go. Right, fed up with these guys. Right, have we got an app we can access through the proxy? Holy, whoa! Did something actually change then? Because I don't think anything changed. Right. Now, where was? Oh yeah, we were adding a name, and we were fulfilling the sitemap. So there we go. We've got a populated sitemap, so we can start doing the scanning. Now, hopefully this search should work first time round because I defined the rule, although there's a risk it will... Right, so this gets us the valid token. Now, the thing to do when you set up these rules is to test them in Repeater before you dive in with Scanner. So this is a post to search with a token. Now, if you look closely at that token, it ends in 8C. And it still ends in 8C. Okay, right. Oh, so we finally found the SQL injection. Now what we can do, now that we're in the tester view of Repeater, if we select issues from the report, we then get a context menu item that allows us to send them to Replicator. Oh, I didn't. Okay, so you don't have to do a lot manually. When it's a scanner issue, you get the title, the path parameter, you get the probe request, and then also all the text that was in the issue response and highlighted, that is then automatically put into the grep expression. So, it's frozen again. There must be some pattern. Right. Now is this yeah, no, it's still chewed up on something. I'm sorry. It completely kills the flow of it, that happening. The other thing that I wanted to point out to you was this issue about the admin interface not being accessible. The admin interface being accessible to a non-authorized user. You can pick this up with content discovery. So. Yeah, but what we're seeing here is all the threads in content discovery are starting and frozen. So what will happen is when you pick that up manually, now that guy's not happy either now. So issues that are not discovered by the scanner, you can also send them to Replicator, but what you need to do, you need to give them a name manually, and you need to give the detection logic manually. So for instance, for an admin panel, just the string, like admin panel that's present in the page is usually enough, because when they fix it, you'll get a 403 forbidden, it won't include that. Okay, a couple of other things that can be useful in here. Now, we've got session IDs in here. Right now, these are valid. 3 days later, when the developers look at these are going to be invalid. Now, what we can do to deal with that, first of all, we can clear the cookies out of our requests. So we've not got anything that's specific to us. And we can also empty the Burp cookie jar. Now, the final piece of the picture is to create a login macro. Now, within project options, sessions, macros. Now, if we look down on history, we can find a post request that is the login, so we can name that as login as test. So now this is reliably reproducible. So even if all those session IDs have expired, the macro will run, create fresh session IDs, and the developer can successfully reproduce these. One other thing that you might need to do, you might have some config within Burp that is required to connect to your target site. So a common example is hostname resolution. So if you want to include some of that in the replicator file, so that's taken out of your running Burp config, saved in the replicator file, and then when it goes to the developer, they get it. So this will encourage it to work out of the box. Okay, I'm sorry the demos were lively. So getting away from anything that that's going to rely on any sort of network communication with this virtual machine, I just wanted to talk to you a bit about coding the extension. Now, has anyone here had a go at coding a Burp extender? 1, 2... Java, Python? Java. Good choice. Python. So I've opted to use Java. The overriding reason is that each Python extension has a separate Python interpreter, so there's a bit of an annoying delay at startup. I also find, because Java's strongly typed, you get better IDE hints when you're working, which is actually quite handy when you've got an intricate API to work with. Now, a lot of this is actually not very specific to Burp. So this panel that we see, you code all that using Swing. There's a small bit of the Burp API to put it in the tab. Now, one little feature that I put on, if you notice in core Burp, if you send an enable to repeater, the tab flashes for exactly 3 seconds, it turns out. Now, what's quite a nice touch is to do the same for extension-generated ones. Now, the way we can do this is, this code here is, when we add our panel to the Burp hierarchy, we can actually walk up the Swing hierarchy and get access to the tab. And then we can then set the colour, and we can set a Swing timer after 3 seconds to reset it back to black. Now, another part of this that looks great when it works is when we've got tokens that update, each time you press test, the tokens update just like they do in Repeater. Now, unfortunately, the Burp API doesn't provide you a convenient way to do that, but there is a really neat workaround. So what you can do is you can add a header just before you before you send the request. And then you can use an iHTTP listener. And what that does, that sits right at the end of all Burp's processing. So after all the macros and session handling rules have been applied and the request has been updated and it's absolutely ready to go out to the web server. So what you can do within the handler, if you detect that header, then you remove the header to avoid polluting the web server, but you also now know that that request corresponds to what is being displayed right there. So you can update the display in real time. Another thing people have wondered about is how you get access to the macros and session handling rules from within an extension. Because the functionality is a little bit hidden, but there are two really useful calls. There's save config as you want the as JSON methods. Not the save config ones. The save config as JSON and load config as JSON. So that lets you get access to all the proxy scanner, project options, configuration. And actually, those two things allow you to do a whole ton of things and extensions that you would not otherwise be able to do. Okay, so I think that's the end. I'm really sorry the demos didn't work out. I've given this presentation 5 times now. 4 times they've worked. So thank you for at least not walking out. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Paul. Right, so next presentation's up at 3:45. We've got James Kettle in here, practical web cache poisoning. I think that's his black hat talk from a couple of weeks ago. And then in track 2, there's Mikey Jack.
You have questions?
Yep. Do you want questions?
You can ask as many questions as you like, primarily not of a debugging nature.
So, in terms of making money and pen testing, it's always great that the pen testers do the retesting. So the developer says, yeah, we fixed it. It comes back to the pen tester tests it again, says, no, you haven't, fix it again. Are we sort of cutting our margins a bit by getting the developer to do their own retesting?
Well, I think in business, it's always best to do what's right for the client rather than squeeze as much as we can out of them. Now, I have often had it that a client's come back to me and said they fixed this, and I've looked at it and not one single change has been made. And I know I'm looking at other faces in this audience who I know for a fact have had the same thing happen. So I really think making the process efficient is good. And I mean, most pen test firms seem to have great margins anyway.
So I could see this being useful for, say you go and do the test, for example, then the developer asks us to do the retest, you're not available, so I get given a day to do it. I'm not up to speed with the app, I don't know how the app works. So if I could have that export off you, it'll make it a lot quicker for me to go and do the retesting. I can see the benefit there.
That is a really good idea as well. And it's actually something I didn't mention, and especially for the triages up there. I think this is something that would work well with bug bounties, because there seems to be a bit of a problem there when people report complex issues. I think triages, they've got a million idiots reporting non-issues, and then when there's something unusual but complex in there, it can get lost in the noise. And I would think some system like this, perhaps with a bit extra reliability, could help. Oh, just shout.
So, in my experience, a lot of developers don't have access to tools like that. So, given where you work, have you thought about making a cut-down version so that the developers can reproduce the issues without having to buy a Burp license?
So, this works with Burp Community. Oh, sorry, did I need to repeat? So we asked, would we make a cut-down version that people could download for free? so that developers could do this without buying a pro license? And the answer is absolutely we did, and it's called Burp Community Edition. Come on, one more, please. Absolutely, in that instance, don't you need to be pro to get on the BAP store? Absolutely not. If we go on here, on the BAP store, if you look at the detail column, some of the BAPs are pro only, most of them work in community, some of them only work in a more limited sense in community. The enduring problem, actually, with community-only BAPs is where they send their output. With pro BAPs, it works really well to create informational issues. A lot of those BAPs that work like that, the community version, just prints output onto the the output tab here within the extender, which, I mean, it works. It's just not quite as good. Come on, I think we can get 2 more questions.
Are you getting fired for not doing your demo?
Possibly.
I think buying a round of drinks at the bar afterwards would probably help.
You
at least owe it to us, Paul. Come on.
I think I'd do better to get fired. Especially as I've seen people drinking these, like, triple pink gins.
Wasn't me. Question at the back.
So far we're on 46 minutes. I think essentially I replaced 10 minutes of constructive content that was difficult to show people with 10 minutes of flipping windows around and looking bad. So sorry about that, guys. It's like you know what? There are actually videos that show this online, but I just didn't actually trust my ability to get on the internet from here and show you to them. If you go on the extension page, there's a link to the developer bit. It's a bit more condensed, only a couple of minutes, and there's a link to the pen tester bit as well. There's no info about the coding techniques I mentioned, but of course, like all the other BAPs, the source code is open. It's on GitHub, so you can look through and learn. Do look through people's BAPs. There's tons of cool techniques in those open source BAPs. Loads of stuff to learn. Okay? Right. Enjoy the rest of the conference.